Brown horse, this is white horse. Stand by. Pursuit report 2-1 over. The white horse is brown horse. Stand by the copy. Line Sierra 2-0. Personnel line Alpha controlling what appears to be at headquarters, right? That's a fine Lima. Tuesday, April 29, 2003. Roughly 2 months after U.S. forces invade Iraq, BBC News releases an article that is so strange, it seems to go against the very nature of our reality. Now, in order to understand the true significance of this article, we need to take a journey back in time, all the way back to approximately 2,500 years before the birth of Christ, and to a place that we now know as modern-day Iraq. And it is here that we begin our story. Tales of supernatural beings can be found all over the ancient world. The Bible, the Book of Enoch, and the Book of Giants, as well as other ancient Jewish texts, all speak of an event where fallen angels descended to earth and fooled mankind with their knowledge of science, war, and beauty. It is also recorded that these fallen angels, or watchers as they are called in the ancient texts, manipulated the genetics, the DNA of mankind, creating an actual race of giants as well as other hideous monsters using animal DNA. Descriptions of these disgusting beasts can be found in the Book of Giants, which, by the way, was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls collection. Parallel to that, other ancient texts speak of the same exact event, except it's from the fallen angels or the Watchers' perspective. In ancient Babylon and Mesopotamia, for example, the Watchers were seen as a good thing. They came to help mankind and they showed people how to do cool things, and they also created a mighty race of giants, men of renown. However, biblical accounts reveal these beings to be evil fallen angels led by Lucifer himself, who want nothing less than the total destruction of mankind. Quote, the antediluvian Apkallu were divine just like the Watchers. According to one story from the Babylonian period, the Epic of Era was the god of pestilence and plague. Marduk banished the Apkallu to the Abzu as a punishment for provoking him to send the flood. Supernatural beings linked to a global flood, who are afterward banished to the abyss. Sound familiar? Interestingly, the 4 Apkallu who appeared after the flood were only partly divine and could mate with humans, again like the Watchers. The last of the post-flood Apkallu, Lunana, who was 2/3 Apkallu, matches the status of Gilgamesh, who is described as being 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. On the cylinder seal, Gilgamesh is called Lord of the Apkallu, and is elsewhere credited with bringing back great knowledge that existed before the flood. Scholars who have made the connection between the Apkallu and the Watchers tend to interpret the way the Watchers are portrayed in Jewish literature from Second Temple period, like the Book of Enoch, at least partly as a Jewish response to the Babylonian captivity. It was believed that the Apkallu, though potentially dangerous, had preserved secret pre-flood knowledge prized by the pagan wizards of Babylon. To the Jews, however, such knowledge was evil, and the Watchers were portrayed accordingly in Enochian texts. So we have one epic story seen through 2 different lenses. On the one hand, we have the creator of the universe, the God of the Bible, telling the story. He's saying, yes, these fallen Watchers are evil and you need to avoid them at all costs. And on the other hand, we have the account from the Watchers themselves saying, hey, that little guy, referring to God, I wouldn't worry about that little guy. How about that little fella? How about that little guy? I wouldn't worry about that little guy. Quote, scholars have known for years that there are parallels in the Mesopotamian legends and the biblical accounts of the patriarchs. Enoch is similar to an antediluvian king named Amidurranki, and Noah is variously called Utnapishtim in Babylon, in Sumer, and Atrahasis in Akkad. But even those accounts are part of a fallen realm military campaign, a supernatural psyop. For example, the accounts from Mesopotamia portray Gilgamesh as a mighty warrior, a hero 2/3 god and 1/3 man. He has adventures and slays monsters. Notably Humbaba, the defender of the faraway cedar forest, had been assigned to terrorize humans by the god Enlil, who was Enki's brother. In the Second Temple Jewish account known as the Book of Giants, Gilgamesh was himself one of the gigantic offspring of the Watchers, as was Humbaba, the monster Gilgamesh set out to kill. This is how Gilgamesh was viewed by the Jews between the time of the Babylonian captivity and the birth of Jesus. Basically, he was one of the Nephilim. End quote. One of the Nephilim. In case you don't know what a Nephilim is, it's the unholy offspring between the fallen Watchers and a human woman. Yeah. Moving back to Gilgamesh, he was a giant, part supernatural being, part human, otherwise known as a Nephilim. Now here's where it gets crazy. Scholars actually believe Gilgamesh existed. And not only that, this article from 2003 the BBC News put out says they may have actually found his tomb. Quote, I don't want to say definitely that it was the grave of King Gilgamesh, but it looks very similar to that described in the epic, Georg Fassbender of the Bavarian Department of Historical Monuments in Munich told the BBC World Service's Science in Action program. End quote. So let's take a look at this in the big picture and see if anything makes sense. Because as of now, this whole thing still remains a mystery. First off, the Bible says there will be a time when the Nephilim return. Some people believe this is a spiritual return, by demonic possession. Others believe it's physical, as in a return of the giants. Fast forward 2,000 years. Archaeologists find Gilgamesh's tomb in Iraq, 2 months after U.S. forces take over the country. Is it possible that when news broke of the discovery of Gilgamesh's tomb, orders were given from the highest possible levels of government, and U.S. troops arrived at the site to seal it off? DNA was collected from the skeleton and brought to a top-secret underground research lab, where tests were conducted, tests involving cloning technologies and CRISPR-Cas9. Of course, the only thing we can do is speculate. So what do you think about this? Do you think they really found Gilgamesh's tomb in 2003 as this article states? So what happened to it? And why is there no mention of the contents? Or maybe what they found was so insignificant that they thought all news coverage should just stop. Music. MSR, can you see the palm grove in the northwest? Not sure which one you're calling. Contact the dump truck heading north. In about a minute. What comes to your mind when I mention West Asia? Conflict? Regional rivalries, maybe? Millions in Syria and Iraq are facing water shortages as the region's longest river, the Euphrates, dries up. Israel and Jordan have been engaging in drought diplomacy over scarce water resources, while Kuwait is converting the world's largest tire dump into a city. The Euphrates has been the cradle of civilization in West Asia. The river has been the lifeline for millions in Iraq and Syria for thousands of years. But now it has sunk to a historic low, sparking the region's worst water crisis in years.